Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our Policy Advocacy Training Part 2 today. It's so great to see all of you here today. My name is Amanda Ritten. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the policy organizer for San Diego 350. So as people are joining, I'd like to encourage everyone to please add their name and their pronouns to their Zoom name. And in addition, please stay muted for the duration of the event. If you have any questions or comments, please just go ahead and put those in the chat. There are going to be a couple opportunities for questions throughout the training, but feel free to put those questions in the chat as they arise. Also want to inform you all that we are recording this event today and we'll be sharing it with you all later. And we hope to take a Zoom photo at the end. For those of us who are in San Diego County, we are zooming in on Kumeyaay land. They are people whose traditional lifeways intertwine with the worldview of earth and sky in a community of living beings. This land is part of a relationship that has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced the Kumeyaay people to the present day. It is part of a worldview founded in the harmony of the cycles of the sky and balance in forces of life. It is important for us to pay our respects for the past, present, and future generations of Kumeyaay people. So we are so excited that all of you are here today. For those of you who are new to San Diego 350, we're an inclusive volunteer organization devoted to inspiring a movement to prevent the worst impacts of climate change and climate injustice. We strive to create a future that supports a livable planet and a just society through education, outreach, public policy advocacy, and mobilizing people to take action. So I hope after today's training, you all feel empowered to take action and join us here at San Diego 350. So we have a couple of facilitators, including myself, for today's training. So I'm going to hand it over to them to introduce themselves. Pia, do you want to start?
Sure. So my name is Pia Piscatelli, she, her pronouns. I have been doing policy advocacy work for a few years now, and I got involved with San Diego 350 about a little more than a year ago. I'm currently San Diego 350's public policy team co-chair. I just want to say congrats to all of you for being here. I think this is huge. I mean, it's a nice day out, it's a Sunday, and this type of stuff isn't hard, but it can be really intimidating. I mean, some of the things my first call to my representative came far later than it should have, embarrassingly so, that I don't even want to tell you when I first did it, like years after I started doing this work. So I really applaud everyone for being here to learn more and to take more action.
Thanks. Leanna, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, I'm Leanna. My pronouns are she, her, and I started policy advocacy work less than a year ago. I'm going to be talking a little bit about letters to the editor later, and that's what I've mainly been focusing on. And I learned how to write those in a very similar situation to this. Someone who'd been writing letters for a long time kind of broke down the structure for me, which I will do for you later. And then I just jumped in and started writing them and kind of learned as I did it. And I also want to really applaud all of you for taking that first step and coming here to learn some of the basics. And hopefully you'll also jump in and keep working with it later on.
Awesome, thank you. All right, if we want to go ahead and go to the next slide. Cool, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to do a quick review of what policy advocacy is, and then we're going to jump into how to multiply your impact by engaging friends. We'll do a breakout session during that segment. Then we'll move to how to contact your elected officials through phone, email, and social media. And then our final segment will be influencing elected officials through letters to the editor. We'll do another breakout, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Next slide. Cool. So before we jump in, I want to quickly go over our group norms for this session. And they are, I will treat everyone with respect. I will be an active listener and learner. I will assume others have good intentions, and I won't dismiss, criticize, or show disdain for others' ideas. And I will speak from my own experience, and I won't assume that I know where others are coming from. Next slide. Wait, why am I talking? I will be present and take stock of why one is speaking. One mic, take turns speaking, and only one person talks at a time. Step up, step back. For those of us who speak often, give room for others. Those who speak rarely, speak up. And lastly, I will create a safe space in our meetings and in our work. San Diego 350 does not tolerate any forms of oppressive behavior, in particular, any sexism, racism, anti-Blackness, classism, homophobia, transphobia, or ableism. All right, next slide. Great, so let's quickly review what policy advocacy is. Next slide. So policy advocacy is a range of strategic actions within a campaign to start, direct, or prevent specific policy changes by targeting and influencing decision makers and the people or organizations who influence them. So when we think about policy advocacy, we really want to identify what we want our outcome to be. You know, what policy do we want to see? And then from there, we want to identify who can create that outcome, who can affect that policy, what decision makers are involved. And then from there, we can identify the strategic actions we can take to get the desired result. Next slide. So why is policy advocacy important for climate action? As we know, climate change is this huge issue to tackle. So in order to achieve our climate and environmental justice goals, we need structural, systematic, long-lasting changes to legislation, regulation, and policy at all levels of government. And advocacy and other tactics is how we influence those decision makers to get the policy changes we desire. A lot of climate change action that we need cannot happen without elected officials, regulators, and government staff. So policy advocacy can help us communicate and build relationships with these decision makers to advance our goals. Next slide. Awesome. So as you know, this is the second part of this training series. And if you were not able to attend, or if you haven't watched part 1 of this training, I highly recommend that you watch it. It's linked in these slides, which you'll get access to later. It's not required to participate in today's training, but we do cover a little bit more in depth what policy advocacy is. And then we also cover how to give public comment at public meetings and best practices for meeting with elected officials. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Pia.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. So again, my name is Pia Piscatelli, she, her pronouns. I was really excited to be able to talk about this section, which is multiplying your impact, because honestly, this feels like the fun part. It's really you talking up the topics that are interesting to you, that you want to advocate for. It's bringing people in, and it's making a bigger impact. So it's a lot of fun to talk about this topic. And in this section, I'm going to be talking about why it's important to multiply your impact, how to do it, and some best practices. Plus, we're going to have a breakout session in this section as well. So before we get into the how, why it's important. So when we're talking about basically influencing policy, we're talking about power. And specifically, we're talking about political power. So that means the ability to influence the decision makers who are basically setting the policies that influence our lives. And so in general, the more people you have in the movement, the more effective you can be in influencing that policy. So when we're talking about what those decision makers care about, what the elected officials care about when they're making these decisions, they care about a few things. So they care about getting reelected. They obviously want to be elected for a reason, And so that means they probably want to stay in that position. Their image, they care about their image both with the media and the public image, so with their constituents. So if you can tap into reasons for them to basically care about the issues that you care about, it helps you to build that political power. Public input, they care about what the public thinks, especially when you go back to those first 2 points that they want to get reelected, and they care about their image. So they care about what their constituents think and what the public thinks about them. And then the community, they care about the issues that they, presumably got into the office to influence. And as we all know with climate, whether they say climate is their top issue or not, climate impacts everything. So, we come in a really great position that we can relate basically all of the issues that we want back to any issue that they say they care about. Now, when you're talking about, again, those decision makers, those elected officials who are the ones that we want to influence, we have to think about who has political power with them. So who can influence what they do. Constituents are a big part. Voters, the people who voted them in, the people who can re-vote them in whenever they're up for re-election. Their friends and family, so their circle of people. And really why that has a big political impact is just think about your own life. I mean, if my mom came to me and said, hey, I want you to do X, I might, kind of blow her off and say, no, I'm not going to do that. But I'm probably going to be really thinking critically about what she said because I care about her opinion and I trust her opinion. So those friends and family are a big part of who has political power. Donors, the volunteers who worked on their campaign have political power. People who can mobilize a lot of votes, so people who are influential in the community, have a lot of political power because they have this influential position in the community that a lot of people consider what they think as important. So those people have a lot of political power. The media, big organizations in the area, and then especially those big organizations and businesses in the area who raise money for them have political power. So now that we had some of those background information on influencing policy and political power, going back to San Diego 350's strategy, we're all about building a people-powered movement. We want to build momentum with the community in order to make an impact and do our policy advocacy work. And in that political power that we're mobilizing, relationships are vital. We want to build relationships between us and elected officials, between us and those key people who have political power. We want to develop relationships with other organizations and community groups that believe the same things that we do and want to see the same things happen. And us as volunteers, we want to build those relationships with our network in order to do more on the policy advocacy side. Because in general, the more people that you have participating, the stronger that your movement is going to be and the more influence that you're going to have. When we want to bring our network of people on board or influence decision makers, story is so important. And with story, this is a huge topic in itself. I mean, you can spend a semester talking about being a better storyteller because there's so much involved in it. But in general, the big takeaway here is you want to show, not tell. You want to basically give a story over just using facts alone to demonstrate your point, because facts are important when you're using them strategically, but we have a hard time conceptualizing facts. We have a hard time remembering them because it can be a lot thrown at us, especially how we're getting that information, versus a story taps into your emotions, and it's a lot easier to remember that and why something is important over just the words and the verbiage and the facts alone. And another powerful thing about stories is there's a lot of perspectives on the same issue. So if we want to pass policy A, we all collectively might be having that same message of pass policy A, but we're all coming from a different place of why it's important, why it matters to our community. So if we're all sharing all of those reasons why it matters and why it should matter to that decision maker too, and then saying, please pass policy A, it's building this really strong case for that policy to pass. So having those stories and answering why it's important for all of us when we're talking about the policy advocacy work that we're doing is vital. Social media is such a powerful tool for bringing people into the movement, and especially now with COVID that we can't interact with our networks the same way that we could before. Social media, I feel like, is even more important to bring people into this policy advocacy work. And to show the example of how you can use social media or just honestly small ways to share your story, I pulled these few examples on this one campaign that we worked on last year, San Diego 350, along with many other organizations worked on. It was to pass a bill called AB 345, which would have established a protective barrier between oil and gas infrastructure, so like oil wells, and sensitive sites, so homes, schools, playgrounds, community areas, that type of stuff. A story doesn't have to be this long-winded, super powerful, 2-page story. It could be a really quick way to show why this matters to you specifically. So I'm going to go counterclockwise and start in the top right. That top right example is a tweet someone did, and they basically used their political power to show why it was important to them and why it should be important to their representative. So they mentioned that they're a constituent, that they're a doctor, so they're an expert on health, they're a parent, so they're pretty influential in the community. And they use those points to say, this is why it matters to me, and this is why it should matter to you, because me as a constituent cares about it, me as a health professional cares about it, and me as a parent in the community cares about it. Going over to the left, the art image there, image and art are such powerful ways to show rather than tell, because you could basically say this whole thing in a paragraph, but look how clear that image is of, here's a playground and a kid playing on the playground, and there's this oil drill right behind them. That makes it so clear to see what's happening. So images and art are a great way to easily show what's happening rather than just telling it. Down below that, basically putting your image on something and standing behind something as an individual really humanizes the issue. So you can see that Aaron had posed with a sign that was created to show why that there's the support of AB 345. It's a great way to show rather than tell, put a face behind the tweet or the post, and just show why it's important to you personally. This last one, so bottom right, I think is such a powerful tweet, and it really shows you don't have to use a lot of characters, a lot of words to paint a picture. Someone had tweeted this last summer, so at least 6 months ago, and I still remember it. It says, my daughter called to support AB 345. She asked me if they really care that she has asthma and has trouble breathing. I said yes, I lied. I honestly, this totally guts me every time I read it, because it does such a great job showing how this impacts people. It's not just a thing that we're asking for. It really impacts the people in the community. And you can see that they painted this picture without, saying all these different words to explain what's going on. They told the story and they said, please do this. So all of these, I think, are great examples that it doesn't take a lot to show rather than to tell. And then taking it one step further for multiplying your impact, it's bringing people on board, but sometimes when you're trying to make things happen and when you're doing policy advocacy, it's thinking strategically for the people that you have as part of the movement who will be the most influential. So thinking about who would be the best to advocate for the position or for the issue, having people who are most impacted that have those direct stories to be able to share those stories and make them front and center. If you need to basically influence somebody who is the key decision maker in something, so if it's, say, the city council and you have one person who's a swing vote, it's turning people out in that particular district who can influence that person. So in multiplying your impact, it's bringing as many people as possible, and it's also using those people in the best way possible to make the greatest impact. So we're going to go into a breakout session. With this breakout session, we're going to go into small groups, and we're going to take 8 minutes to discuss 2 things. So what are some tactics that you can use to multiply your impact? And then if you were a person on the receiving end of those tactics on that outreach, what would make you more likely to participate? And with this, I wanted to mention too, if you do not want to be part of a breakout group, you have the option to stay in the main room. I highly encourage you to be part of it because we have so much collective knowledge in this group that you can learn from all these small groups that you're part of. But if you don't want to be part of it, you can stay in the main group and we'll regroup within like 8 to 10 minutes. So Amanda, what do you need to break everyone into breakout groups? Welcome back, everyone. Just in case some people are still joining, I'll say this in a minute, but I would love for us to do some review from the breakout session. If you could post in chat, what are some of the tactics that you all came up with for ways to multiply your impact? It would be fun to read a few of them out loud for everyone. We might not be able to get to all of them, but I also encourage you to just keep checking the chat for ideas because I know we have varying degrees of experience in doing this policy advocacy work. So I know we have a bunch of people who really know what they're doing that could be leading this whole talk and not me, Amanda, and Liana. One of the things that I want to say for a great way to multiply your impact as we're waiting for comments is I personally think one great way to multiply your impact is to volunteer with an organization like San Diego 350. I used to do policy advocacy work on my own, and I was kind of working in a silo that is just, you can only do so much as an individual unless you're really influential, which I certainly am not that influential. But if you're volunteering with an organization, you're able to utilize shared resources, work together to accomplish things and make an even greater impact. So I personally think one of the best ways to multiply your impact is by working in coalition or in organizations like this. So let me see, let me go to the chat now and read a couple responses. Using personal network of friends and colleagues. Yeah, that's a great way to multiply your impact. Having subject matters present in advocacy campaigns. That's a great way, and knowing your audience. Showing how a topic affects you personally. So showing rather than telling and really making it personal is a great way to multiply your impact. Show up to local issue forums and connecting with representatives and neighborhoods through social media. Yep, that is a great way to multiply your impact. Emails and texts personalized for friends and family. That is a great way to multiply your impact because our network of friends is a lot more receptive to what we're saying than strangers. So they care about what we think, we care about what they think. So personalizing it and doing those one-to-one, reaching out to friends and family is a great way to multiply your impact. Building relationships with elected officials, a great way. Posting ideas on Facebook and tweeting, especially around campaigns, that's a great way. Keeping the outreach relevant and digestible. Yep, that is a great way to multiply your impact. So making it something that people actually understand, can digest, and can take an action on. Having conversations with those around you. Yeah, that is a great way. And especially, I like this point, Tina, not telling them what to do, but rather why it's important to them. Yeah, and telling why it's important to you as well is such a great way to multiply your impact. Talking to neighbors. For in-person advocacy, offer friends a chance to practice with you. Yep, that is a great way. Just helping them make it simple and easy for them to participate is such a great way to do it. Yeah, no, that's great. I probably could spend all day on this chat reading these tactics, so I probably should move on before Amanda yells at me. Looking at just the power of multiplying your impact in this particular scenario, so San Diego 350 oftentimes releases calls to action to do things and basically use your voice for policy advocacy. And so in this example, if we put out an action alert to call into a city council meeting, there are different ways that you can multiply your impact. So obviously you can participate, but you can also share the information and really personalize it to the people in your network on social media, so you're following. You can call and text and personally invite a couple of your friends to call in as well. You can help a friend, which I know that was one of the tactics that came up in the chat. You can basically support that friend of yours who has never given public comment before to be able to do it themselves and making it really simple. And the power of all these things is who we reach through doing them. I mean, if we had 50 people sharing social media and each had 200 people following them, that's potentially 10,000 people who are seeing that post. If you contacted people individually, I mean, that's hundreds that you can go from there if 50 people did it. If 50 people got one other person to take action, that's basically doubling your impact. So it doesn't take a lot for us to bring people in and for all of us collectively to make a difference. And then as far as best practices for inviting people to take action, some of these were mentioned in the chat as well, but I feel like my biggest takeaway on here is the sharing excitement. Someone had told me years ago, passionate people bring other people on board for what they're passionate about. And in contrast, you know, if I said, yeah, whatever, Jan, please share this. It's, you know, I'm sharing it. I don't really know the importance of it, but please share. I know it's something we need to happen. I mean, Jan may or may not share it because, you know, it's not that exciting to do versus if I say, hey, I volunteer with San Diego 350 and we're really excited for this initiative that we're pushing because of X and because of Y, and it's important to me because of Z. It helps Jan realize why it's important and be able to see herself also getting involved and doing more because you're excited about it. Offering to help, so that's supporting them to make it happen, to teach them how to do it, making the task simple. Those are ways to invite people to act because you're making it easy and you're offering a support system for them so they could do it themselves. The ladder of engagement is really just starting off asking for small things that are easier to do and then moving on to those bigger things once you get people on board, because it's a lot easier to ask doing a petition and signing a petition versus calling into city council. Because if you've never done either before, it helps a lot to start with those simple tasks. Asking for feedback. So after your friend was able to take action, seeing what went well, seeing what didn't go well, seeing what they liked about it, how they felt, what they want to do to continue to take action. When you're asking for their feedback, you're actually seeing how they want to take action. And so then you can tailor what you ask next based on that. So everybody wins. And then congratulating them. I mean, doing all of these actions, they're not that big of a deal, but they feel like a big deal, especially if you're early on in doing these things. So congratulating them, thanking them, making it seem like a big deal, because it is. And honestly, the more you do these type of things, I feel like it's a win-win in the sense that you're multiplying the impact for the issue that you're talking about, but it's also more fun for you. I mean, when you have more friends involved in this, you can laugh and talk and text each other while you're taking these actions, relate to each other. At different council meetings, at the last environment committee meeting that I went to, I had, you know, my San Diego 350 and some other people that I knew were coming. But there were other people that I didn't know were coming, and they texted me after I made comment and were like, that was great, we're coming up soon. And then I could congratulate them. So there's a lot of ways to invite people in, but it's also great that you're inviting them in because it becomes more fun for you. So does anyone have questions on this section? So multiplying your impact. And even if we don't get to questions here, if you think of them while we move on to the next section, you can still ask them in chat and I'll either answer or we can ask them toward the end. Well, I'm thinking we can move on to the next section.
Sure. Okay. So again, if you have questions on that previous section, there's going to be another question and answer portion at the end of this segment. So we'll be sure to answer all those questions throughout the training. But I am here to talk to you about how to contact your elected official through phone, email, and social media. Next slide. Cool. So we are going to be using Jamboard next. Jamboard is an application that we can use to brainstorm our ideas. So I'm going to drop this link into the chat right now. So go ahead and follow that link. But how we're going to be using this today, at the top of the screen, you can see there's little arrows that can advance each slide. And each slide is going to have a different question that we're going to be asking throughout the training. To add your thoughts and answers to the question, you can click the sticky note icon on the left side of the screen, type your answer and press save. Automatically, there's going to be another sticky note that will appear after you save your first one. You can keep adding thoughts if you'd like, but once you're done, go ahead and press cancel, and then you can move your notes around the board. So let's go ahead and give this a try if we want to move over to the Jamboard PIA. Our first question is on slide 3, and it is, what are the benefits of calling or writing elected officials compared to other forms of advocacy? I'll give you a few minutes. All right, makes it more personal, direct contact with the office. Yes, exactly. All right, they can advocate for the issue with their elected official, record what you say. That's a big one. Let's see, I'm having trouble reading these. You have time to collect your thoughts, more time and space to make your point. Exactly. They track constituent opinions, humanizes the message. You can tell your personal story and how it is connected to the outcome that you want. Yes, these are great. Awesome. Cool. So let's go ahead and go back to the slides. And I just want to, you can go on to the next slide. Perfect. Yeah, you all touched on a lot of the benefits of contacting your elected official through these methods. Just want to highlight a couple of them. So it really demonstrates passion and power for an issue, especially if there's a lot of people calling and writing their elected officials on a particular issue. And it will hopefully bring the elected officials awareness and attention to the issue. It also allows constituents to communicate directly with their elected official, which one of you had mentioned, and can be used to persuade elected officials before making a decision at a public meeting. It's also a great way to get involved on your own time, at your own convenience. Say you're not available for the public meeting that they'll be discussing the issue on, you can still be sure to give your input to the elected official. Next slide. Cool, so let's break down a couple of ways you can contact your elected official and best practices when doing so. So for calling your elected official, the first thing you want to note is that you're going to be reaching out to the elected official's office. So it's unlikely that you're going to be speaking directly with the elected official. Therefore, be prepared to talk to a staffer or to leave a voicemail. When making your comments, it's important to state your name, neighborhood, or city, a couple of talking points, and then be sure to connect those talking points to your personal story. So think about why this matters to you and be sure to include that in your comments. It's also important that if you are a constituent to say that you're a constituent in those comments. Elected officials are especially interested in what their constituents have to say. Before you call, take the time to think about what you want to say and how you want to say it. I typically write out a quick script before I call an elected official's office, practice it out loud a few times, make sure that I'm speaking slowly and clearly and getting my message across. When you're calling your elected official's office, try to keep your comments pretty short and simple. I recommend around 2 to 3 sentences. And also be direct in what you're asking for and try to make the biggest impact in the short amount of time and words. So I like using the sentence stem, I'm urging elected official to support or oppose blank because blank. And then end the message by thanking the staff for relaying the message. Next slide. Okay, so here is an example of what calling an elected official's office might look like. These slides are going to be available to you at the end of the presentation, so I'm not going to go too in depth with these examples, but I do want to point out a couple of things. So first, this comment includes their name, that they're a constituent, and then states upfront what they're asking for. So here, Jane is asking Senator Waso, vote yes on AB 345. And then after, she includes why it's important to her and ends by thanking the staff for taking her call. Next slide. Okay, so let's move into best practices when emailing your elected official. Much of the components of emailing your elected official are going to look similar to calling your elected official, but this is a good way to ease yourself into this form of advocacy if you get nervous talking on the phone. So first, when creating your email, be sure to address what you're talking about in the subject. So for example, you can write support AB 345. It's important to be as clear as possible for the purpose of your email in that subject line. Then when writing the body of your email, again, you're going to state your name, neighborhood, a couple of talking points, and your personal story. When emailing your elected official, you're going to be able to include a bit more detail to compared to calling your elected official, which is really nice, but still be sure to keep it pretty concise. And then at the end, thank the elected official. And also I just want to point out that these emails may or may not be read directly by the elected official, but are more likely going to be read by staff and then relayed to the elected official. So if we go to the next slide, we can check out an example. Cool. So again, I'll let you read this on your own time, but I wanted to note that the subject line, very straightforward, vote yes on AB 345. And then all the components that we saw in the calling example are here, but we just have more space to add additional talking points and share more about why this is important to us. Next slide. Cool. And then lastly, I want to touch on tagging your elected officials on social media. So Pia did a great job of sharing why social media is really important for spreading the word and encouraging others to get involved. So in addition to spreading that visibility among our friends and family, we can also use social media to build visibility for elected officials. So again, we want to include our story, why this particular subject is really important to us, and then we can choose to tag our elected officials in hopes that they will see the message as well. When posting on social media, again, we want to be pretty concise. Some social media platforms have character limits that we should be aware of. But bottom line, we really want to include why it's important to us, so it helps build visibility and encourages others to take action. Next slide. All right, so here's just another example of a social media post. I just want to point out that, again, it states why this issue is important. It tags the elected official and then includes a few hashtags from the campaign. Tagging elected officials on social media is definitely an important policy advocacy tactic, but above all, this tactic is really important for building visibility and multiplying our impact. Next slide. Cool, so the last thing I wanted to show you in this section is how to find contact information for your elected official. So all elected official contact information is posted publicly online. So this is just a compiled list of contact info for elected officials in San Diego County. If you don't know which district you live in, most of these sites have tools that help you find that information, and you'll have access to all of this at the end of the training. And from there, I'm going to open it up to questions. All right, so we have one question. Do staffers collect the number in favor or against the issue, or do they really note your reasons? I guess if someone else knows this exact answer, please speak up. But I think they just record if they're support or against, if they're getting a lot of calls in one day about a particular matter. But I would like to hope that they do note the reasons as well and get those, have those relayed. Marie notes a good point to include that you're a registered voter in the district. That's a great way to showcase that you have a voice in their re-election or their election in general. So going back to the point that elected officials really care about what their constituents say and which ways they're voting, that's a great point to include. And then, is leaving a voicemail versus sending an email better for getting your message across? I would like to say that calling has a bit more of an impact than sending an email. But again, in those emails, you have quite a bit more space to share why this issue is important to you and make it a bit more personal. Is it okay for constituents to voice their opinion in Spanish or is it English only? I would like to believe that you could definitely state your comments in Spanish, but I'm not sure if if all offices have translators. But that is a really good point. I can definitely make a note to check on that. Alrighty. A lot of campaigns online have pre-generated text for emails. Is it worthwhile to rewrite those? They're usually very long, and will emails and staff note that messages are all the same? I think that if you have the time, rewriting those messages is pretty important. Again, including that personal story is nice for these offices. And also, I always worry that if offices are getting a lot of these messages that are all scripted the same, they might be marked as spam. So just something to think about. I'm not sure if that is totally true, but it is something to think about. So if you have the time, I would definitely recommend rewriting those messages. Awesome. And then, yeah, we have a few comments in here. Emails are digitally stored and can be searched. That is a great point. And calling and emailing is definitely the best way to go if you have the time. Okay, it's not recorded as spam, but definitely counts more if you're in your own words. Perfect. Thank you, Masada. Awesome. Well, thank you all for those questions. I'll definitely check about the Spanish translation in offices and get back to you, Francisco. But with that, I'm going to move or hand it over to Leanna to talk about letters to the editor.
Hi. I forgot to mention before, but I am part of San Diego 350's public policy team, and I currently run an effort to get more people writing letters to the editor. So that's part of what we're doing today. Next slide. So first of all, what is a letter to the editor? It's a letter sent to a publication about an issue of concern to its readers. Those of you who have seen the San Diego Union Tribune before might recognize that picture as the letters to the editor page. Usually your letter to the editor is going to respond to a specific article in the publication. Although you can just send in a letter that doesn't respond to an article, it's a lot less likely to be published. And you also want to send in your letter within like a couple days of that article being published, because these newspapers want to publish things that are recent and relevant. Next slide. So now that we kind of have a basis for what this is, why would we want to write a letter to the editor? Why might this be important? So go ahead to the Jamboard link, and page 4, drop some ideas. And Amanda put it in the chat again. Expand the reach of our message, for sure. That's huge. Gain a bit bigger audience, absolutely, and a different audience too, than when you might have like on social media or the internet. What else? Give contrasting voice to a rather biased point of view. Yeah, for sure. Lets publication know it is an issue readers care about, gets them to cover the story more closely, for sure. You want to use letters to the editor to raise awareness for an issue, for sure. Opportunity to provide more detailed data info than you could in social media, sure, yeah. To contest a point in an article, sure. And we'll talk more about how you might do that with the structure. Yeah, there's definitely still a sizable portion of the population that reads local newspapers, and you're definitely hitting that with letters to the editor. You can drop your official's name as another way to get them to pay attention. Yeah, the staffs of elected officials definitely pay attention to what's published about an official. And I would also add that if you mention an official directly in your letter to the editor, like go ahead and also send them that letter so they know, even if their staffs miss it, they will know. You can send the article to the elected official. Yep, perfect. Yeah, those are great. We can go ahead and jump back, and I will just add a couple more, but you guys hit most of them. Yep, raise awareness. We talked about reaching new audiences. You can also use your letters to the editor to get people to take a specific action. And we'll talk a little bit more about calls to action when I break down the structure. Get your government officials to pay attention, for sure. Also, one of the things I really love about letters to the editor is it's just a great way to organize my thoughts and get them down on paper on a specific issue, because if your letter doesn't get published, and it very often won't, then you can always take those thoughts and rewrite them into a social media post or a blog post, or write an email to your elected official or call your elected official if you have those thoughts organized. Also, letters to the editor kind of on a bigger scale is sort of a numbers game. So if a publication receives like 10 letters on climate change, then they're going to be a lot more likely to publish 1 or 2 than if they only received 1 or 2 letters on climate change. So even if your letter doesn't get published, there's a good chance it's going to help another letter on a similar issue get published. Next slide. So now that we kind of have an idea of why we might want to write this, let's talk a little bit about what the structure could look like. So first of all, what I'm about to say is all general guidelines. You don't necessarily have to follow every step. Sometimes you may just want to write from the heart. Sometimes not every step will fit exactly with the point you want to make. But this is just kind of a good framework to get started and to organize those thoughts. So first, you're going to want to refer to the article you're responding to and thank the writer or the publication. Thanking and praise can only help, can never hurt, trust me. And then you want to go and transition into your main topic or issue. This issue can be as broad as climate change in general, or it can be a super specific issue affecting a super specific community. And then from there, you want to jump into identifying a solution to that issue that you just talked about. And this does not have to be a brilliant scientific or political solution. It does not have to be anything new. It can just be, we all need to talk more about climate change. It can be our government needs to put more money into this issue. It could be we need more research. Yeah. And then at the end, you want to provide a call to action. And this is really important because you're going to have a reader who's reading your letter and who's like, yes, this issue is super important. Oh my God, I understand what you're saying. And your solution seems like a cool idea, but how can I be part of that? And you want to give them just like a little step of how they can help with this issue that you care about. Next slide. So now that I've kind of covered the basic structure, let's look at an example. I really like this example because it follows the structure very rigidly, which, like I said, you do not have to do, but it really shows how each of those steps can be used well. So first, the writer of this references the article she's responding to. It's an opinion piece, and she thanks the publication for Crystal Egger's article on these alarming weather patterns. And then she transitions into her main issue, which is about extreme climate change, how it's placing us in harm's way, and how it's also a problem for the ecosystems around us. And one of the things that I really like about the way she transitions into the issue here, like Pia was saying earlier, like stories and emotional connection are so important. And she just throws in at the beginning as a San Diegan of 24 years, and it just puts like a little piece of her into the letter. It's just so simple, but it's a great way to make her letter more compelling because she just has this kind of personal reference. And then from that issue of climate change, she goes into a solution. We must take action to stop all of this, put politicians in office who respect science and who will combat climate change. And then finally, at the very end, she has her call to action. This election year, vote for the Earth. For context, this was written in October of 2020. So that makes sense. Yeah, so it's just, she starts with the thank you, goes into the issue of climate change, solution of putting politicians in office, and then finally her call to action, vote. Next slide. So now that I've kind of gone through all those steps, I'm going to give you all a chance to kind of try that out for yourself. So we're going to go into breakout rooms in just a minute. You are going to get 15 minutes total in those breakout rooms. And I think Amanda just put the document in the chat. And that document has everything you'll need for the breakout room. It has a link to the article you can respond to, which was in the San Diego Union Tribune yesterday. It's called the US Formally Rejoins Climate Accord. So go ahead and just take a quick couple minutes. There's a summary of the article on that document to go ahead and read through that. You can also skim through the article. It's pretty short, but you know, a letter to the editor is not going to be a full analysis of the article. You're just taking a little piece of it, or a broader idea that you get from it, and responding with your opinion. And this article is pretty open, so you should be able to do a lot of different things with it depending on what you want to say. Once you've gotten a quick chance to look through that information, talk to your other new friends in the breakout room and go through each of the questions on the document, which will basically take you through the letter to the editor structure. And take your time, really dig into your opinions. It's fine if you don't get through all of them, but if you do get through all of them before the session is over, go ahead and start drafting your letter to the editor. Keep in mind that there is a 150 word limit, so be nice and concise and straightforward with your opinions. So whenever Amanda has that set up, we can go for it. I'm going to talk a little bit more if nobody has questions, but if you do as I'm talking, feel free to throw them in the chat. Yeah, that's great. Setting up Google Alerts is a great idea. Yes, if you are part of San Diego 350 and have access to the public policy folder, we have a document specifically about how to set up Google Alerts in there. So I'd recommend that resource. And I'm also going to put my email in the chat in a minute if anyone has questions later. And if you are interested in taking a look at that document, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to get that to you. Yeah, but I use Google Alerts all the time. I think that's how I came across that article that you talked about in your breakout rooms. And they can help you without having to fully read publications, figure out what's going to be helpful to you to respond to. Are letters to the editor that oppose other LTEs as useful as LTEs that bring up new points? That's an interesting question. I've actually never written, and I don't know if I've ever even seen a letter to the editor, another letter to the editor. So if anyone else has more knowledge on this, feel free to let me know. I would say that generally responding to an article is a little more useful, but if you have an important point opposing another letter to the editor, like write it. And another kind of point off that is just there's no downside to submitting letters to the editor. Again, the worst that could happen is that you don't get published, and it maybe helps someone else's letter get published that has kind of a similar idea to yours. So there's really no downside in submitting something if you have an opinion. Yeah, you totally could respond to an article and make a new suggestion. Yeah, that's another way. If you oppose a point in a letter to the editor, you can definitely connect it to another article in a different way. If it's about an article, it may also signal the paper that articles about the topic are of continuing interest to the readers. Absolutely, that's super important. And a big part just about like using letters to the editor is it's really raising awareness for issues for everyone, for the public, for the paper itself, is getting an understanding that people are interested in this issue, and your government officials are getting an understanding that people are interested in this issue. So that's huge. Yeah, great. Feel free to keep writing questions if you have any. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat. So if you have questions about letters to the editor later, feel free to email me. Also, if you draft this letter to the editor that you talked about in your breakout rooms and want me to give it a read over before you submit it, feel free to send that to me as well. I'm going to pass it back to Amanda now.
Cool, thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed the topics that we discussed during this session today and the breakout activities. Now I'm going to encourage you all to use these skills that you have been learning from this training and the next training. There is a City Council Environment Committee meeting with the City of San Diego coming up this Thursday, February 25th at 1 p.m. That's going to be a great place to discuss the energy franchise agreements with the City of San Diego. We will have a toolkit that will be available to you all. So, and I'll be sending that out in the next day or so. So how you'll get that information is if you're on our Google group with the public policy team at San Diego 350. If you're not on that Google group, please email publicpolicy@sandiego350.org and we can add you so you can get that information. And then also join our public policy team. Again, you can email us at publicpolicy@sandiego350.org to learn about how to take action, engage in these policy advocacy tactics, and volunteer with us. Next slide. All right, and yeah, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you joining us on this Sunday afternoon. I have a survey that I'd be really appreciative if you all filled out. This will help us improve this training as we are hoping to continue giving this training throughout the year. And it also will document which policy advocacy tactics you are interested in, and so you can be contacted to engage in those. Also, join our next public policy team meeting. This is a great way to learn about all of the opportunities that we have and hear from all of our different committee leaders and different projects. So that's actually going to be next Sunday, March 7th at 2 p.m. You can get the Zoom information for that by emailing public policy team or publicpolicy@sandiego350.org. And all this is linked in the slides, which I will also share with you